Good evening. My name is Mark Baker, and I'd like to welcome you to our special board meeting of the Northeast School Corporation. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone of policy 167.3, public participation at board meetings. This is the short and paraphrased version of the policy, so please bear with me. Speakers may be scheduled by the superintendent to address subjects which are already included on the agenda. Citizens desiring to address subjects which are included on the agenda of a meeting of the Board of School Trustees will advise the superintendent prior to noon on the Friday before the scheduled meeting. The request must be made in writing and must include the name of the speaker, the address, telephone number, name of the organization represented, and the specific agenda item to be addressed, and whether speaking in support or in opposition to the proposal. Tonight, we have two groups that have made such requests to present information to the board. Persons speaking at the board meeting will address remarks to the president of the board. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. Members of the board and the superintendent may have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. The president of the board will be responsible for maintaining proper order and adhering to the established time limits. Tonight, we have given each group 30 minutes to present their information to the board. The presiding officer may A. Prohibit public comments which are frivolous, repetitive, or harassing. B. Interrupt, warn, or terminate a person's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directive, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. C. Request any individual to leave the meeting when that person behaves in a manner that is disruptive of the orderly conduct of the meeting. The presiding officer may, letter D, request the assistance of law enforcement officers in the removal of a disorderly person when that person's conduct interferes with the orderly progress of the meeting. And E, call for a recess or an adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight and respecting the opinions of others as they present their information to the board. At this time, I'd like to invite Greg Ellis and his group to present to the board at this time.
Is that good? On behalf of the Save UHS Committee and the W community, I would like to start by thanking the board and Superintendent Baker for the opportunity to speak this evening. We appreciate, respect, and support the work that each of you do in making decisions that are in the best interest of the entire corporation and its students. My name is Chris Jobe. I'm one of 4 members that serve on the Save UHS Committee. I'll be one of 2 Save UHS Committee members speaking this evening. The other will be Greg Ellis. The Save UHS group formed about 3 weeks ago in response to hearing there was potentially a vote imminent on the closure of what we heard at that time was limited to Union Junior Senior High School. We quickly organized a small committee to express our concerns with the rumored school closing at the November 11th Northeast School Corporation Board meeting. We have spent the majority of the past 2 weeks reviewing the proposed Northeast School Corporation reorganization plan and the corresponding feasibility study that was first provided at the November 11th board meeting. In addition, we have been reviewing the Northeast School Corporation financials, including items such as debt, expenditures, budget, and revenues, in an effort to better determine the role of both Duggar Elementary School and Union Junior Senior High School play in those specific aspects of the finances of the corporation. But I should add, this effort is something much more than a small community group looking at the corporation's finances. It's been more about the entire Duggar community rallying behind something very near and dear to them, that being their local schools and the children that attend these schools. As a group, we fully understand that the corporation, and in turn the schools within the corporation, are facing some very challenging economic times. We also understand that there are predominantly two ways that have the most appreciable impact on any struggling economic situation, those being increasing revenue and or decreasing expenditures. Greg will discuss these topics in more detail following my portion of the presentation. My portion of the presentation will predominantly focus on the importance of Duggar Elementary School and Union Junior Senior High School's financial impact on the corporation as a whole through both assessed valuation and through student enrollment. Jefferson and Cass Townships are the two townships that make up the Duggar Union portion of the Northeast School Corporation tax base. Jefferson and Cass Townships account for 42.5% of the total assessed valuation of the Northeast School Corporation. Why is that important? Well, it's important because assessed valuation directly supports and impacts the corporation's budget for funding such as debt service and capital project funds. Assessed valuation is also very important specific to this reorganization discussion because part of the basis for recommendation of a recent feasibility study and a significant part of the corporation's reorganization presentation 2 weeks ago focused on the functional concerns of the facilities at Duggar Elementary School and Union Junior Senior High School, particularly Union Junior Senior High School. Dating back well over a decade now, there has been a significant disparity in the corporation's funding appropriation to Union Junior Senior High School in comparison to North Central Junior Senior High School through its capital project funding. In 2002, the corporation spent $600,000 at Union Junior Senior High School and Duggar Elementary School for renovation upgrades to the library art room and the re-roofing of existing facilities. During that same year, the corporation spent $3.3 million at North Central for the construction of the junior high and for the re-roofing of existing high school facilities. In 2012, the corporation spent $1.9 million at North Central for HVAC improvements, heating and air conditioning improvements, to improve the energy efficiency and reduce the maintenance and operating costs specific to those facilities. In 2013, the corporation spent another $1.5 million at North Central for the re-roofing of existing facilities to improve the energy efficiency and reduce the maintenance and operating costs specific to those facilities. In summary, since 2002, approximately $6.7 million has been spent on renovations and upgrades to North Central, while $600,000 has been spent on these same types of renovations and upgrades to the Union Duggar facilities. Keep in mind, Cass and Jefferson Townships are funding 42.5% of this portion of the corporation's budget. This amounts to over a $6 million disparity in capital project funding appropriations between North Central and Union Duggar over the past decade. With this significant disparity in corporation appropriated funds to the Union Duggar school facilities, again, we received approximately 8% of these funds since 2002. As compared to the monies Union Duggar has contributed to this portion of the budget during this period, again, 42.5% through assessed valuation of Cass and Jefferson Townships, it would only stand to reason that the Union Duggar school facilities would be expected to be in need of some repair and upgrades, which obviously can only be achieved through the commitment and the support of the corporation. Kindergarten through 12th grade student enrollment at Duggar Elementary School, Union Junior Senior High School accounts for approximately 340 students, plus or minus, or 25% of the overall corporation enrollment. A decision to close Union Duggar schools will effectively shut the corporation doors for nearly all the students currently attending Union Duggar, which again makes up nearly 1/4 of the entire Northeast School Corporation student body. This being the same corporation the Duggar community and the students have been an active and successful part of for the past 50 years. At the November 11th board meeting, the reasons why Union Duggar students would be unable to attend the other Northeast School Corporation was described in more detail, so I won't rehash that. but these reasons essentially come down to the personal financial burdens and hardships that the Union-Duggar families simply cannot afford. But outside of the personal financial impacts Union-Duggar school closures would have on the individual families, what would this student non-retention mean from an overall corporation standpoint? Financially, at the current state contribution rate of approximately $6,100 per student, this means the corporation will not receive upwards of $1.5 million to $2 million per year into their general fund each year moving forward. We realize the recent feasibility study may suggest that whether a single student from Union Junior Senior High School chose to attend other corporation schools could be considered financially insignificant, because Union Junior Senior High School is shown in the feasibility report as operating at a loss on a per-student basis. However, we feel very strongly the financial impact to Union-Duggar student non-retention extend far beyond what's depicted in the recent feasibility report. Financially, for the corporation, this potentially means a significant amount of money already appropriated for expenditures in the last half of the current 2014 fiscal year will not be available should Union-Duggar students transfer out of the corporation prior to the February enrollment count. Financially, transportation inefficiencies will significantly increase for the corporation as commute distances and commute times greatly increase for those few retained. Financially, the ability of the corporation to pay down its debt and secure future borrowing will become much more challenged. Financially, the overall ability of the corporation to remain fiscally solvent will very likely become compromised. Greg will show us some of this in more detail in his PowerPoint presentation following my presentation. The last item I plan to discuss in my portion of the presentation isn't related to finances. Rather, it pertains to the communication process associated with the corporation's plan for reorganization. I feel it's important to express the overall disappointment from those in attendance on this side of the gym, and possibly even from those in attendance on the other side of the gym as well, with regard to the decisions of the corporation to pursue strategic plan for reorganization, essentially behind closed doors. I would like to personally think from a school board perspective that when decisions are considered that will have the kind of significant impact to so many families and to an entire community as the closure of 2 schools, that complete and full transparency would be at the absolute forefront of everyone's mind, starting in the initial stages of the process. It's difficult to understand the motivation to consider decisions with effects that as far-reaching and of the magnitude with essentially no formal public input. To think that Farmersburg, Shelburne, and Duggar communities could have woke up less than 2 weeks ago and heard on the news that their school, that is most likely the heart and lifeblood of the community, was in store for some major changes specific to consolidation, when the case of 2 Union-Duggar schools being permanently closed without prior public disclosure is somewhat astonishing. The corporation has a 5-person board that appears to be split on whether to close 2 of its schools. A superintendent who only 2 months ago was publicly quoted noting there were a lot of options still being considered with respect to reorganization. But yet the board continued to make conscious decisions to ignore the potentially high value of a structured community involvement process. Knowing these decisions, as even the recent feasibility study describes, will not be without community concern. I came across a short excerpt from the Sullivan County Schools Comprehension Reorganization Plan document. It describes the value of the public input process in regard to school consolidation, I think, very well. This document was written in 1963, describes the finalized plan for establishment of the Southwest and Northeast Sullivan County School Corporations. In the opening paragraph of the plan, it says, the Sullivan County School Reorganization Committee has met regularly each week since the committee was organized in April, which was several months prior to this document being released, as I understand it, and has insisted that people from the county who are interested in the education of the youth attend these meetings and enter into discussions concerning school reorganization for Sullivan County. Many citizens have attended these meetings, and their ideas have helped the committee to solve many problems and thereby provide for a more adequate educational system for Sullivan County. Obviously, a lot has changed with respect to the county schools in 50 years since that document was written. Demographics have changed tremendously, finances have changed tremendously. But what hasn't changed is the community's desire to be an active part and a voice of any anticipated school reorganization that could directly affect their community. The absence of open-door procedures, public involvement, most notably full transparency in this process, has been extremely disappointing. I'll close my part of the presentation with emphasizing the Save UHS group feels there's still an opportunity for the board to actively engage local communities in deciding what's best for the long-term stability of this entire corporation moving forward. And we would hope and we feel that this can be accomplished without the need to close Duggar Elementary School or Union Junior Senior High School.
Good evening. I'd like to echo Mr. Jobe's comments and respectfully say that I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the board this evening. And I as well have a lot of respect for the fact that the job that you five folks have at the table is very difficult. And it's certainly more difficult today even than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And I also want to say that I think it's very important for both of our groups to be able to provide information to the board and to be able to work through an issue such as this as adults and set a good example for our children, to be respectful for each other and be respectful of each other as we move through the process. I don't like the idea of working on a potential reorganization as two divided groups. There are a lot of families on the north central side over here that I have the utmost respect for, that have been very good to my family personally, and that have been very good to my children personally over the years and the different things we've been involved in, and I appreciate that greatly. So, and you'll hear that again through the course of my presentation. I think it's very important that we try to tackle this problem as a group, and it's my hope that the board considers a significant amount of community involvement in reaching a resolution to the problem that we're facing today. So with that, I'm going to begin my presentation here. Can the board members all see the screen okay? Everybody see it all right? Okay. All right, the first item I want to discuss is the consolidation effect on enrollment for Northeast School Corporation. We performed a poll of the parents that have students enrolled at UHS and Duggar Elementary, and what we found was no great surprise to those of us on our committee. Of 144 student families polled, only 5 students in our poll stated that they would remain in Northeast. That's a retention rate of about 3.4% just on those numbers. And while that number may not hold true, I think it's safe to say from our end, the overwhelming majority of the families that would be affected by a potential closure would choose for their own personal reasons to select a school that would be much closer geographically to where they live at. So as Chris stated, a 3.4% retention rate would result in a $1.85 million loss in revenue to the corporation's general fund. And that's the general fund alone. I'm going to talk specifically about multiple different funds as we move forward here. But a $1.85 million loss in revenue in the general fund. This next spreadsheet is a result of a budget dissection that we performed. And it was performed by Debbie Ellis, who's my mother. But she's got a bachelor's degree in accounting. She's got a master's degree in business administration. And she's also a certified federal financial manager. So, it's very important to me to make sure that we had someone with the credentials to go through all the different costs and all the different bills that have been paid from this past fiscal year. And that's exactly what we did. This wasn't from the budget. This wasn't a theorized number. These were the actual expenses from this past fiscal year totaled up. And you can see down here in the bottom of the left-hand column, the total general fund disbursement to pay the bills, essentially from the last fiscal year, was $9.28 million. And you can see that broken down in the left-hand column by school. The number of students at each school is in the middle, and then the expenditure per student is on the far right-hand side. And these numbers, very, very much like those we saw last time we met, show what looks to be a significant disparity in the unit cost per student at Union High School versus North Central. But the thing you have to be careful of when you look at the cost from a unit cost perspective, that's dollars per student, is that there's some functional economy that the corporation takes advantage of when they pay bills. And by take advantage of, I don't mean to insinuate there's anything wrong with it, because there's not. I would do the exact same thing. But for instance, at Union High School, all the utility bills are paid on the high school. They're not split up, and they don't pay as two separate electric bills, one for the elementary and one for the high school. They pay one bill. That trickles on down to cafeteria services, janitorial, several different items. So when you pay all those things on the high school, and you don't include that on the elementary's part, that drives up that unit cost inappropriately, and makes it look much higher than it actually is. And when you have a small number of students, it even further accelerates the difference in those two numbers. So we backed up and we looked at it a different way. The way we looked at it was, let's take the total number of students that go to school at Union High School and Duggar Elementary, which is 321, and we divided that by the total number of students in the whole corporation. So that comes up to 24.71%, about 25%, just like Chris said. So if you take the whole entire budget, which again was at $9.28 million, and you multiply that by 24.71%, our fair share, so to speak, would have been $2.293 million. That's the first $2 million number you see there. That's the allocation based on percentage. When you total up all the bills that were actually paid for Duggar and Union High School together, it comes up to $2,399,830. So rather than a $500,000 difference in expenditures that we're looking at, it comes up as a $100,000 expenditure. And a lot of that, like I said, is due to funding allocation codes and how the bills are actually paid, and which dollar amount those two quantities go into. So as you can see right there, just a straight percentage takeoff based on the number of students we have paints a much different picture from a deficit standpoint for Union High School. So that kind of covers, let me back up here a couple of slides. So that covers the general fund. Those two items right there cover the general fund. The next one I want to talk about is the capital fund. And the first thing I want to talk about is the budget impact of the capital fund. Should the board vote to close UHS and Duggar Elementary, Cass Township would regain ownership of the actual school and its facilities. The township's going to pick up the campus. The capital fund, the amount of money that the corporation gets to work on buildings, is based on how much your buildings are worth. So the actual buildings in the corporation, all the buildings are worth about $42 million. Duggar's campus is assessed at $12 million. That's what's that's worth. So Duggar is about 29% of the assessed value of the Northeast School Corporation properties. Progression of alternate plans, which what we're speaking about there is closing Duggar, and Union will immediately cut the capital fund by around 30% annually. So you're not only going to lose the $1.85 million out of your budget that we're talking about in the general fund for the number of students that end up going to other schools, you're going to lose 30% out of your capital fund because those buildings at Duggar don't make up your assessed value anymore. Your assessed value goes from $42 million to $30 million. We don't feel that that's calculated into the revenue forecast that the feasibility study attempts to discuss. The feasibility study addresses the general fund. And the debt services fund is the same way. It's funded off a very similar formula, and the debt services fund is going to take a significant hit as well. So the next slide is a financial breakdown of the capital fund expenditures from this past fiscal year. The expenditures were $954,000. As Chris stated earlier, Cass and Jefferson Township make up 42.5% of the property tax base for the whole Northeast School Corporation. Curry, Fairbanks, and Jackson make up 57%. So if you looked at it from a percentage standpoint again, $405,000 would have been Duggar Elementary and Union High School's fair share, so to speak. $548,000 would have been the amount that the taxpayers actually paid going into that fund. If you look at the actual expenditures at the bottom, Cass and Jefferson Township received $111,000. So that's $294,000 that came out of the taxpayers' pockets in Cass and Jefferson Township that were spent on school expenses in Fairbanks, Curry, and Jackson. $842,000 out of that $954 was spent in those three townships. And that's not an anomaly, that's a trend. You know, Chris talked about $600,000 being spent out of that $7 million over the last 10 years. And this is showing 1 year sample of exactly that. That's been year after year after year after year after year. And the debt services fund is the same way. There's no debt carried at Union High School and Duggar Elementary School. The debt's carried on all the other schools in the corporation. The debt services fund, 43% of the money from the debt services fund comes from Cass and Jefferson Township, and it's being used to pay debt on schools in the other three townships year after year after year after year after year. So that rolls me into the next fund category I want to touch on real briefly, and that's transportation. If student retention stays below 10%, the transportation cost for those handful of children spread out over Cass and Jefferson Township would be around $52,000. And that's a very inefficient use of $52,000 as well. If, for the sake of argument, retention would happen to be around 50%, the additional cost on top of the current transportation cost would be about $120,000. If every student from UHS and Duggar went to the other Northeast schools after a potential closure vote, the additional cost on top of what the transportation cost is now would have been $178,000. So that's just a couple of numbers to keep in mind here. So a quick recap of the budgetary impact. UHS and Duggar Elementary cost about $2.4 million a year to operate. Student enrollment would result in $1.85 million being cut out of the general fund. The Cass Township ownership of the buildings and the alternative school plans, once that $12 million comes off the assessed value of the Northeast properties, that capital fund is going to decrease by $300,000, and the debt services fund is going to decrease by $373,000. So you add those numbers together, you've got $670,000 plus your $1.85 million right there, and you're looking at closing a school that costs $2.4 million to operate, and you're going to get $2.5 million cut out of your budget every year going forward. So those two items alone make it financially unreasonable to close UHS and DES from a long-term perspective. I'm going to roll, and I'm running short on time here, but I'm going to try to run through this real briefly. Proposed savings are some areas that we feel are very important. The proposed savings that we have summarized here, we didn't come up with those off the top of our head. They came from a published document that came from the Superintendent's Association called the Citizens Checklist. And basically that checklist was provided as a bulleted list of things that each school corporation should try in order to save money when times are hard like they are right now. And we don't feel like these areas have been capitalized on by the corporation. So the first item I want to talk about is privatization of the non-certified staff. And it wouldn't have to be done 100%. There are many different configurations. If you look all across the country, that's been a recurring trend. You know, don't cut the money in the classroom. Don't riff teachers. Let's cut in other areas. Let's privatize our janitorial work. Let's privatize our kitchen work. Let's privatize our bus drivers and our transportation. We do privatize some of our, we've already got some bus drivers that own their own bus, but overall, when you look all across the United States, a good rule of thumb is a 30% saving when you privatize those services. So UHS alone, we could save $56,000 annually. Duggar Elementary School could save about $23,000 annually. And at Northeast School Corporation-wide privatization of these services could save as much as $400,000 annually. So that's something we haven't done in the past that we really need to consider and look into, regardless of how a vote works out. Because that's an area we can save, that's an area that we can cut costs and not cut those costs in the classroom. Volunteer coaches is another area we feel like that savings can be capitalized on. We estimated at UHS alone, and that's below the varsity level. We realize we have to keep a certain amount of paid coaching staff on board. But a lot of the positions, the current coaches already donate their money back into the different school funds. And so at UHS, you could save $18,000 a year. The elementary school, you could save about $5,000 a year. That's $102,000 worth of savings from this page rolled up. Another area we feel like that we could potentially save the Duggar at is by utilization of the building. The feasibility study pictures are not indicative of an overall condition of the school. We had a group of people go through with Dr. Baker and look at some of the different buildings in the corporation last week, and really the Duggar schools are no different than any of the other schools. We all have old buildings. You can go through any of the buildings in the corporation and take pictures of ceiling tiles that are water stained, paint that's chipping off, carpet that's worn out, dirty boiler rooms, dirty closets. UHS and Duggar aren't any different than the other schools in the corporation. The current UHS DES building utilization could be reorganized to decrease overhead expenses. That could be done temporarily until the old building could be brought up to more energy efficient standards, or it could be maintained permanently. The students could be housed in the newer portions of the buildings. There's a functional floor plan that fits that need. And another thing I think is noteworthy is the buildings are not structurally deficient. The issues that we've looked at and saw in the last meeting are cosmetic in nature. A little bit of elbow grease and some paint goes a long way in fixing those things. Another one of the items for proposed savings is utilities. We went to the town of Duggar, and they agreed to cut our water rate by 40% right off the bat at an estimated savings of about $5,000 a year. And we feel like if the corporation would just approach all of the utilities for every school, again, regardless of how the vote goes, that we could get reduced rates for utilities for several of them. From reorganizing internally, the savings could be around $35,000 from only using the new building. So the subtotal of this page is $40,000. That's a grand total just on those last two pages there of $142,000 that could be saved at Union High School in Duggar alone. I'm going to keep moving right here. Try to get through. Looks like I got 2 minutes. One of the things we want to bring up is that we feel like the board's making a hasty decision. You can see in the Greene County paper right here, Dr. Baker was quoted as recently as September of this year saying that the closure of Duggar schools is a rumor. And Dr. Baker's a man of his word, and I take him at his word, and I know at this point in time when they got this comment that this wasn't a high priority topic and regular topic of discussion for the school board. We've discussed that. I know that it was brought up in February when we got the feasibility study back. It kind of lost some momentum there through the course of the summer, and then it's just resurfaced in the last month or two. But we feel like more time needs to be taken to take a look at that. The open door law is another area we feel like Chris discussed some of those concerns. The executive board meetings that have been held to discuss reorganization were held under topics that were allowed specifically by Indiana law for an executive meeting to be held. And reorganization and school closure is not one of those topics. So you can't just throw that in there under a topic that is an approved topic. And the meeting minutes of the reorganization discussions have been very nondescript. So I'll try to get through this. So revenue, to increase revenue, we could pursue a tax referendum. Already did that, they got it approved. I'm gonna try to get moving through this and get through as quickly as I can there, Dr. Baker. A 7.5% on $100 property tax referendum could be voted on as early as this coming May, and it could fund this whole corporation by $650,000. That's not just helping Duggar, that's helping every school in the corporation. Bar Reed passed a very similar tax referendum to keep their school afloat very recently. It's allowed by Indiana law, and it's been approved by other areas. Legal representation, as we said before, we don't want to spend our time and effort and resources on legal representation. But if the board votes to close the Duggar schools, we'll be forced to do so, and we're prepared to do so. We would much rather put our time and effort into a mutual plan here where we can partner with the other groups here from North Central and work through solutions that are cooperative in nature, that are going to help every school in the corporation, and hopefully be a success story here in another year. So in conclusion, please postpone a reorganizational vote until a tax referendum can be voted on in May, until further coordination with Southwest School Corporation can take place to ascertain the best model for all area schools. You know, there's potential that just due to the geography of the Northeast School Corporation, that upside down L, that Cass and Jefferson could go in with Southwest perhaps. That's a topic that we would very much like discussed between the two organizations. And then we would also like full optimization of the unused savings opportunities to be capitalized on. And again, that helps every school, not just the Union Duggar schools. So if you'll give us that time, if you'll postpone a vote, there's a commitment on our part to spend our time and effort and our money working to help solve this problem. There are viable solutions that will help every school in the corporation, and we'll take care of these long-term fiscal issues. Thank you very much for your time.
Next, I would like to invite our editor to the information on this staff.
Good evening, board members. My name is Marie Hendry, and I'm representing the Save the Northeast School Corporation Committee. I currently have children attending schools in the corporation. I would like to thank you for your time, and we know that your decision is very tough, and where you're sitting tonight, I don't think any of us are envious. As stated in Dr. Boyd's study in 2012, education is a product of the dynamic culture in which we live. Like the changing society in which it thrives, education must continually change in response to the education demands of people. School corporations are confronted periodically with the question of whether or not their schools are satisfying the current needs of society, a question that is often difficult to answer. Given the current climate and the health of Indiana's economy today, school corporations are being pressed to provide more and more services with less and less financial resources. The ultimate challenge of efficiency versus the comprehensive offering of educational opportunity is the focus of Hoosier School Corporations today. Our committee has given the board copies of the graphs that are being projected up on the screen. These graphs are based on the data provided to us by the board, which was presented on November 11, 2013. We would like to express our support for Dr. Boyd's recommendations in regard to the reorganization of the school corporation. Dr. Boyd proposes the following: to have 2 elementary schools, one located at Farmersburg and one at Hymera, 1 middle school housing grades 6 through 8 located at Shelburne, 1 high school located at North Central High School, and he proposes to close Duggar Elementary and Union Junior Senior High School. With the savings that would come from the reorganization, additional courses could be added to the curriculum. These additional courses are profoundly essential to keeping our students competitive in today's high-tech society. In addition, the advanced courses will provide opportunities for dual credits for students who meet post-secondary requirements. Although no one wishes for the corporation to close any of its schools, with the current and projected enrollment trends, state and local funding, and increased cost of education, the reorganization is the most fiscally responsible and educationally grounded decision for the Northeast School Corporation community. It is respectfully requested that the board considers the following points when making its final decision on how to reorganize the corporation. What has happened in the past lies in the past. We would like our school board to look to the future. Most importantly, make a decision that will enhance the educational opportunities allotted to all of our children. Make a sound financial decision so that our school corporation continues to exist. The loss of all of our schools would impact every student negatively. Every school facility needs to be up to code in regards to health and safety standards. Any facility that endangers the health and safety of our students must be closed. Your vote will impact 1,298 students, not just 321. If a decision for our school corporation is based on just 321 students, that would be unfair from an educational perspective for the other 977 students. We have been informed by numerous teachers and staff that they support the school corporation's proposed plan. Most people of Hymera, Shelburne, Fairbanks, and Farmersburg approve of the decision by not speaking out. There are times when silence has the loudest voice. There are many people that we have spoken to that believe to follow the proposed plan is obvious and is the right decision for our school corporation. There is no need to speak out. Silence shows approval. Our committee could go on and on, quoting numbers and statistics, but we are not going to stand up here for 30 minutes and beat a dead horse over an obvious decision that will be made either this evening by this board or later by the state or another school corporation. Don't prolong the inevitable. Our committee sincerely hopes that the board will adhere to our school corporation's mission statement. The mission of the Northeast School Corporation is to provide an appropriate educational program and learning environment which will effectively meet the educational needs of its students and citizens and help its students accomplish educational goals which are significant, durable, and transferable. The decision that needs to be made is obvious. We strongly encourage the board to vote this evening so that we all may begin our journey together. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I would make a motion that we end this meeting this evening, that the school board meet on Friday to discuss the information we've been given this evening, and on Monday, whatever Monday is, the 2nd, that we would meet